Hey everybody, glad you can join us on the last Tuesday of August. Can you believe August is almost gone already? The lovely heat, and actually you talk about rain next week. Well, I really appreciate y'all joining with us. Today is a new presentation that I've put together and my team's helped me with. I got a shout out for Katie and Lois. They helped me quite a bit, and I stressed them out to the max on this one. Um, But what we're going to cover today is something I've been working on for a long time, and we have implemented. We actually got live customers running into. But we found that in the market, compliance today is, some call it a dirty word, and some just run. They see compliance on a screen and they run the other way. We have the first time we put our booth up about compliance. And we was at a banking conference, and people were coming down the aisle to each booth, and they get to ours, and it was kind of like they just made a little loop around us and kept going. I'm like, it's not going to bite. Come on, let's talk about it. Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about compliance and what we come up with, what we call Compliant R.E.A.D.Y. Now, a lot of folks say that, hey, it doesn't apply to me. But every business today has some type of compliance that's either industry based, government based, state based, and even cybersecurity insurance based. So I'm going to share with you today what we do and how we can help you on your compliance journey, basically. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to be going through some slides. Now, at any time you got the chat. You can bring up questions in the chat. And as I go through, I'll see them and I'll address them as we go through. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Even though we got a question and answer at the end, there's a couple slides in through here that I'm going to stop and ask if there's any questions. But let's make this interactive because that's what I want to do. It's a learning session of what's going on. And then we got a little offer for you at the end of it to help you get started on your journey. So let's get to it, why don't we? Here we go, and I'll share the presentation and we'll get going here. So what we're talking about here today is our Compliant R.E.A.D.Y program. Okay, so as we come up with and showing is our easy button to be Compliant R.E.A.D.Y even when you have a small team. And we run into a lot of folks that they have one person that's responsible for it, so when it comes time to ask all those questionnaires and everything else, they're sitting and going, how am I going to get all this done? And that's what this is about. So, like I said, you got any questions, put it in the Q&A in the chat and come into it. I want interaction and we'll go through it. If there's questions I'm going along, my team may chime in as well. And but don't hesitate. Please ask any question you want to ask. So, is this for you? Well, this is for you if A, you want to ensure that you're compliant at all times, but don't know where to start. And I find that a lot of times is today, because of all the changes, people are starting to embrace that they need to be compliant, but how do they get started? Where do they start? What information do they need to read to figure out what they need to do? Okay, there's some of you that's probably that way. Or you have systems in place, but a small team, and it's hard to manage. Okay, we've got some of our clients was that same situation already. So A and B, we've got clients in both situations. Okay, or you're crushing it and you're looking to level up strategies. And actually, in some of my banking environments, they got a whole compliance department. They're doing that in some of our larger banks, and they got a team to do it. But as things are evolving so fast, they're looking, how can I stay up with it? Because there's so much going on. How do I level up, right? So either you're trying to start, where do you start? A. B, you got a small team, need help. Or C, you're crushing it and you just want to level up, right? So which one are you? If you are doing this, go ahead and put in to the Q&A which one you are, A, B, or C. Just to give me a feel of where you're at. So as we're going through, I can make sure I address things for you as we move through this. That'll be very beneficial to what we're doing because that way I can address specific type of things that'll be very interesting to you. Okay? So let's go on to next. So what we'll discover here in this compliance readiness is ready. What does it stand for? So R stands for receive the compliance steps specific to your industry, which is very important because every industry has something just a tad different. But there's a lot of it that is the same, okay? Evaluate your current state. A is for acquire compliance readiness to be prepared for an audit at any time. And keep that in mind because that's very crucial. Determine a plan of action that keeps you in mind. Now, those of you that's already doing compliance, you know that's called a POAM, a plan of action and milestone, okay? Very crucial and part of what you're doing along your journey. And D, determine a plan of action that keeps you in compliance moving forward. So what are you going to do to stay up? The big thing that we're running in today and we're seeing, folks, is that we're getting asked those questions more than once a year. We're just in B2B alone, we're being asked, where do we sit in our security posture? And security posture also from a compliance standpoint. PCI compliance, SOC compliance, HIPAA compliance. All those things come into play, and now we're seeing where vendors are asking each other where they stand on this. And some won't do business unless you are compliant from that aspect. So, very important. And why? Your job made easy. That's one of the biggest things we want to do. If it's nothing but educating you, or if it's us helping you, we want to help you be proactive instead of reactive, like many are in this compliance journey. So, it's not your fault. A lot of people say, I don't have the time, or this or that, all kinds of different things, and they take it personally. And I get that. I take a lot of things very personal if I can't get something done. But it's not your fault. You know, this is something that we're not taught in school. It's something we learn in the business, and as it goes on, we evolve. I always tell everybody, you go to school, you get your degree, you go to a training class, you do those things, and that's just the tip of the iceberg that you got to learn to be able to do what we do in today's business. And that's part of the reason why I stay in this business, because it's something I do every day. I get to learn something new every day. Or something I've already learned, it evolves, so I got to stay up with it. And that's still learning new every day. And that's what keeps me engaged in this. I just love it. Most vendors keep it complicated on purpose. You know, we got some of these, and just something that's to me that should be simple, like cybersecurity insurance. And we get these underwriters sending these questionnaires out today, and they have gotten crazy. I had one client that got a questionnaire that was 135 pages. It was ridiculous because it's made it way too complicated. I mean, there's a standard for it. Let's follow the standards that are defined, and we got a plan that makes it easier to follow. Let's don't make it harder than what it already is. Most are doing this wrong. And what do I mean by that? In the banking industry, which I do a lot of work in, there's huge fines for non-compliance in the banking industry every year. And what we find out is the most of the actual claims, or the fines, I should say, that are hitting them for non-compliance is not because they're not trying to do it, it's because of who they have doing it. So what do I mean by that? So I met with a bank, and they're a decent sized bank. They're about 15 billion in assets. And they have a compliance officer, dedicated, there. But she doesn't have any staff. So when it comes time for her to do the actual compliance assessments, audits, and figure out what's going on, she needs resources to help, because as a 15 billion asset bank, that's a pretty decent sized bank. So what does she do? Who she go get to help? She got to have someone that can at least understand the lingo and what's going on with this. So what does she do? She turns to IT department to come help her do that. Now, what's wrong with that? Do they have the smarts to do it? Absolutely. Do they understand the terminology? Absolutely. But what's the problem? The person that's doing the assessment is the same person that's being assessed to make sure we're deploying cybersecurity appropriately to meet the controls that they need to meet. That's where a lot of people get in trouble. So when we talk about doing it wrong, it's not because they don't know, it's just because of the resources that are doing it. So that's one of the other things that we're looking to solve. But all that ends today for anybody that wants to really know how to do this and work with us and let us help you, because we're able to address, built this whole program to go off and do it. And I want you to have that easy button. And I know that's a cliche. Nothing in life is really easy until you apply yourself, educate yourself, and make it easy. We can make anything complicated easy if we have the knowledge to go do it. Knowledge is king. And that's the big thing we want to do, is make sure that we got knowledge in your hand to go do these things. Right? So one of the things we come into it is we got to talk about, is your data compliant? That's where a lot of it comes to it. It's about the information flow, who has access to it, who can remove it, how does it change, what is my standard operating procedure to do certain tasks. That's all data that is tactical things that we're often doing, and we need to make sure it's compliant. Now, a lot of people confuse doing cybersecurity with compliance. They are not the same thing. Whereas I describe it as cybersecurity is what I'm tactically doing. It's how I'm installing, how I'm configuring, how I'm monitoring the environment and making sure those things are maintained and up to date, and I'm following my corporate policies, my standard operating procedures on how I do things, education, SAT training, all these things. How am I doing it? How's it operating? How am I documenting it? How am I validating it? How am I changing, updating, all those type of things? Well, that's what compliance does. I have a set of standards that I've got to apply to make sure those things are done. How are they done? How are they documented? All of that. So that's what these two. I can have security without compliance, but I cannot have compliance without security. That's the way the relationship works, okay? Let's see, John Hennessy. I'm going to stop and answer a question real quick. I heard about car dealerships needing to be compliant. Does that apply to my mom and pop's dealership? Okay, you're talking about what's called the FTC safeguards, okay? Now, FTC safeguards, when they come out of the Security Summit, what it's talking about is how you manage all that information, security, and things of that nature. There is the 314.4 is the FTC compliance that would apply to any dealership, because you're handling PII information for customers. Now, when that come out, everybody thought it was just for dealerships, but that's not true. It just happens the dealerships come under it because of the information. But that applies to any non-banking environment that's handling people's information. But yes, dealerships, doesn't matter what size, that's the other thing. It doesn't matter how big or small they are, it does apply. We can go into more on that. If you want to have one-on-one at the end of this, you've got a discovery call, we can get it and talk more. But that's a great question. And that's the FTC, what John's actually talking about. The FTC safeguards, that is a compliance standard. That's one of them, just like cybersecurity insurance standard, the FTC, the NIST framework, the HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, on and on and on. And depending on which states, you have other ones come into play, like New York DFS, the SHIELD Act, and several others. But great question. We can definitely dive in that some more. And I'll come back to your next question, John, but I'm going to move forward just a little bit. Okay? So the next thing is, well, here, I'm sorry, I was answering your question and coming here. This whole plan that we put together to help you do is focus on your business. So that way you do what you're successful at, what makes you money, and we can focus on making sure that you're staying compliant. That's what this whole discussion's about and what we're doing. So my question is to you real quick is, do you see it? I get it. I know the frustrations of it. So just like John's question, it really comes into play where, I'm small, does it apply? Yes, it do. Yes, it applies. We have, just like in the CPA environments, you've got the IRS 4557 rules, the Taxpayer Data Protection Act. Well, when those changes come out and went into law June 9th of 2023, it applies from a sole proprietor CPA all the way up to the big five firms. It applies to everybody that handles taxpayer data. Even a company that does e-filing, that's shipping data. They don't modify the data. All they do is transfer the data. It still applies to them because the information flows through them. And so that's where we come into play to really help and educate people and stay up on it, because we sit and study this. We have a team that works on this all the time. And if you're focused on your business to go run your business, how are you supposed to keep up with all this and as fast as it changes? And that was where we saw the opportunity to fill a hole and help everybody. So I'm going to go back to John again. What do you look for when performing a site evaluation? Very interesting. So there's a couple different things that we do, and that's actually part of the offer we're going to do is one thing. So when we look at it is I want to do an external pen test right off the bat. I want to know if I got any vulnerabilities coming from the outside. And then we do what's called a baseline assessment. Now, the baseline assessment is based off the controls that apply. So in car dealership standpoint, we would set up the controls for FTC, but I always layer on cybersecurity insurance also. Now, the beauty of that is in our platform is both of them, I can do them at one time. So I don't have to do one, then do the other. But we can go through that assessment and figure out where do you sit from a baseline assessment. And from there, then you go into the next level of it where you actually going to have the tools to go in and scan the networks, scan the AD's environments, internal scan to figure out, is there vulnerabilities there? Where are you sitting at? So we can determine, okay, what can be fixed then? You get it fixed. And then what's not fixed? What do you got to put a budget to go fix? For example, if I've got to upgrade a firewall, well, I need to budget that. Well, that's where what's called a plan of action and milestone, the POAM, comes into play. Is that's a plan that says, here's the things that we still got to work on, and here's our plan, our schedule for it, and typically that's in a 12-month window, and here's where we've got to apply a budget for it to go get it done. Now, you got that, you got all the other, and the reporting of this, we can give to an auditor, they come in and look at it, you can get blessed off, okay? But when that auditor comes back the next time, the first thing they're going to look at is, was that POAM? Did you get done what you said you was going to do? So that's just a real high level, John, of what steps you would go through to figure out where you sit to move forward. You get to what's called that POAM. And we'll get more to that. See, anybody else got questions right now? No, John's great, asking some great questions. Okay, so from here is you start asking yourself questions, and it's like, why am I talking about, why am I teaching this? Okay. Those questions like John's asking are very typical to what we get. We get asked these questions all the time. We get asked questions about, well, I'm small, why would it apply to me? I don't do business in that state, so I ain't got to worry about that. I don't have any compliancy standards at all. And the thing about it is, to me, that's an education issue. It's not their fault they don't know. It's us as an industry, from an IT perspective, needing to educate folks that don't have those resources that understand this and can go help them understand where they sit. So that's what I want to do here, is make sure you're educated coming to this, or be a resource to you to help you with this. Either way, I hope that this helps everyone as we go through this. Okay, so we have our Compliant ready to make it easy, right? So what's the fastest way to get to what we're talking about doing here? Well, what we first got to do, let's clear up some things here. Everything needs to fall to you, and you don't have a lot of time. That is the common situation. There is someone in your organization that actually is responsible for this. And ultimately, in any company, the buck stops with the CEO, to be honest. Because from a compliance standpoint, and depending on the compliance requirements, and if you're not meeting them, From a fiduciary responsibility, the CEO is responsible for not being compliant. That's just the plain truth of the matter. You as a business owner, you own it. You are responsible. There is fiduciary impact. If you, for example, you get, and let's take John's case. His folks has got a dealership. If they were to have an incident and PII information, personal identifiable information, gets out that impacted a customer where their bank accounts got hacked, they got identity got stolen, and it got traced back to an incident to their environment, and they didn't have the best practice in place and could show that they have those practices in place, they became responsible for that. That's the impact. That's the world we live in today. If you do these things, you've got your cybersecurity, you're doing the right things there, you got your compliance proving you're doing that, and you're maintaining it. Now you've done your best efforts. Now you're able to have that cybersecurity insurance policy. Okay? And this is what protects you against those situations where you become fiduciary responsibility for something that you could have prevented. Or if you couldn't prevent it because it's a fault of software or hardware, you've done your best effort, and that can be proven. Now the insurance company is responsible to pay out and do those things. So it's very important to what you're doing there. So hopefully that makes sense, what I mean about everything needs to fall on you. That's where you need to look at and say, okay, how am I going to get this done? How do I get the help I need to go do this? Because, this question here I struggle with a little bit. Do you want to be compliant, ready, even when you have a small team? Well, of course you do. The more important thing to me is we need to be compliant. It's not just that we want to be. We need to be compliant. Because if we're compliant, that means we're doing the things we need to do to protect ourselves and protect our clients. That's what I believe is extremely crucial in all this discussion. Okay, Sean Jacobs, can you do this for a bank in Florida, even if we have IT in-house? Absolutely, and we can discuss that more. We have clients that have full IT teams, and our compliance team does this, because your compliance team needs to be separate from your IT team, because your IT team is what we call the subject matter experts. So when we're doing compliancy and we apply this, when we find an issue, let's say when we've done the scans, as I talked before about, we do the base assessment, we come out from there, then we do our scans. From our scans, we generate what's called worksheets. These are things we analyze that we find, either vulnerabilities or misconfigurations or whatever it may be, that falls out of the control that we're looking at. Well, if it's something we see that can be fixed, we actually assign that to a subject matter expert that you have on your team. You identify, here's your AD expert, here's your networking expert, here's your firewall expert, here's your application expert. We assign that specific task to them, and they get this, they ever find it, it shows them what the issue is, they go resolve it, and they provide that evidence back, screenshot, whatever it may be, back, and that comes into our system. As soon as that happens, our compliance team rescans and validates it's fixed, and then comes back into the system. Now it's evidence there and gone. So we work through all those worksheets, and then we get to the end, that's when we come out to the POAM. So absolutely, we work with a lot of teams that have, we've actually got customers that have a different MSP, and we work with their MSPs doing that. We're working on behalf of the bank to do this. So great question, Sean. Yes, we do it, and be glad to talk to you. We've got information at the end on how you can get with us. So let's move forward. I don't make sure we keep moving, but the questions are great. Keep them coming. So are you in, and how? So that question really is coming into it. Back to that A, B, and C. Where do you stand in this whole journey? And does it make sense? Do you understand what we need to be doing to be compliant? Does it make sense? And if it don't, that's okay. Ask the question. Let me clarify it for you because I want to make sure you understand where you're at and what you need to go do. Okay? So what's compliant ready? We talked about it earlier, and I've given you some stuff about here about the receive, the evaluate, acquire, determine, and your job made easy. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So receive compliance steps specific to your industry. That's what the R is. So what is that? This is where we sit down, we look. So like banking, there's various different compliancy. Now banking in the finance area, you got FINRA, you got FDIC, you got FedLine, you got FINRA. All of those are based off the NIST framework, okay? And NIST framework just changed from the 1.1 to the 2.0, which really the major change there was they just split out governance the way it should have been done to start with, if you ask me, but because it clarifies it, it cleans it up. But those are some of the things. But you still got cybersecurity insurance you want to look at, which is based off the CIS controls. Then you start looking at other components, which state you're in, and things of that nature. Because like if you had a bank and you have a branch in New York, then New York DFS applies to you because you're doing business in New York. So those are the things we start figuring out in the R. To receive the compliance steps specific to your industry. That's going to tell us, okay, what's the work we got to do, right? So then we go to evaluate your current situation. So what we talk about in evaluate is we do a base assessment. We also do the external penetration test. We want to know from the external side, what do we look like? Because 9 times out of 10, that tells me something about your posture, something about how you're doing your things. But then the base assessment is where we're going to sit down, and the base assessment questions change based on those controls. When we identify what in the industry, what the different frameworks you got to meet, we set those in, we put that in our system, that generates the list of questions that we're going to ask you in a base assessment, which are going to be answered either yes, yes partially, no, unsure. And we go through that. So this is really taking into account what you know about your environment and what you believe you have in place. Once that's done and we have that, then we actually go into acquire compliance readiness, prepare for that. What that acquire is we're going to go in and do internal scans. We'll do external scans. We'll do cloud-based scans if you got a cloud environment, and we're analyzing all of that to where we can come in and figure out what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be modified to get to that readiness state, okay? Things that we're finding, as I was describing earlier, was that if we find something that can be fixed right then, hey, we're going to send it to the IT team or the MSP, whoever it may be. Hey, here's what it is. Go ahead and fix that. When they give that back, we rescan. Hey, that's one step done. Now we got the evidence. It's there. Now we can go on. Then we want to get to where we get to that POAM, right? And that's where we determine that plan of action. What are the additional steps that we've got to take to round out that readiness, okay? Once you get there and you have that plan, now you know what you have to budget for and get done prior to audit. If you can get it done before audit, great. If it's done and we hand it to audit then, they're going to look at you're still in a good state because you've got a plan. And that's what they want to know. Now, they're going to still test things. They want to understand is, and this is the biggest area that I see people get in trouble with, is change management. Do you have a change management process? If you do, the auditor's going to ask one of the junior people, okay, if this happens, how do you put in your change request? And they want to see if they follow the same thing as what's in the documentation. What is the standard operating procedure? That's one area where I see people get caught on. The other thing is having documentation at all. And you'd be surprised how many folks don't have documentation, and it don't have to be hard. That's where I see a lot of people make things way too hard. Is I got to put this whole document in these steps and all this. All the auditor wants to see is you have a process, you got steps to go do it, and everybody's following the same steps. They could be a bulleted checklist. That will pass audit because you're doing it consistently. Everybody's doing it from the same steps. So don't make it too hard. Try to make it as simple as you can, And that way, it also makes it easier when you're training new people coming in, when you hire people. So that really is one of the areas that we really focus on to make sure we're doing. We get to that, how this is making your job easier is because if we're doing this with you and helping you, you get to focus on your business. And you also see where you're sitting at. Here's the other beautiful side about doing the compliance piece. And believe me, I do this internally for ourselves because I'm a firm believer. You do to yourself what you do for clients. If you don't, how do you know how to do it? But what it allows me to do by understanding where my compliance is and where I'm sitting, it allows me to see what I need to do in my business to keep moving forward. And I'm not building on a house of cards. I got a great foundation. I know I can expand. I can know a bit. When I bring folks in, there's a process they come into, and it brings them into compliance. It's amazing what you can get out of it. Now, it's a pain to get done first, and that's what we try to make easy. But then there's also, we started looking at and saying, okay, where does it take me from there? You know, I've got it, but now I'm going, how am I going to get this done? Where am I going to do it? Well, a lot of people look at it two ways. There's a slow way. Oh, I'm going to go figure this out on my own. I'm going to go do this. How am I going to do this as a team? And then there's a faster way. The fast way is what I want to try to find a way to get you there while you're still being proactive in your business, still growing your business, doing the things that actually makes you money, at the same time giving you that sense of security because you are secure. So imagine you're a compliant ready. Your team isn't wasting time chasing information, answering questionnaires for folks, different people coming in. What is your security posture? Answering those questions. You're actually getting to have a peace of mind about you're compliant and you can focus on your business. So what we developed was what we call compliance as a service. And we got many frameworks we can do this on, and it incorporates all the pieces we talked about into this, okay? Now, what we looked at was, okay, auditors come in, you gather all this data, you give it to the auditors, they review it. When the auditors leave, both parties delete all the information that you just gathered. Auditors don't keep it. They don't keep a record of it. They delete it, they're done, they're out of here. When the next time they come in, they start from the beginning again and going through this. Most people that I see from the business side, they're not keeping that information either because whenever they go, they're doing it once a year and they're having to start over because they don't know what's fresh and what's not, what's up to date and what's not. So there was this hole between everything. So that's where we decided, we've got a platform and we've got a process that could not only do the initial compliance project to get you to that POAM, but then we could maintain it to where within 30 days, you're always compliant ready at any time. What does that do? What we found is we got one company, 1,700 seat environment. It was taking them 9 months every year to get their SOC compliance done. By doing this, we dropped it to 4 months every year. That cut 5 months of compliance work off of not only the customer, but also from the auditing side. Because our platform, once we have that information in there, we can actually give the auditors access to the platform read only, and they can go see all the data. They don't have to go ask questions and disrupt business to go get the information they need to do their audit. And that's what we're doing here. That's what this is doing for you. So I'm gonna stop right there for a second because I've seen questions popping up here. Let's see what we do. Let's see. Sean, awesome. What is the typical timeline for implementing a compliance program from initial planning to full deployment? I'll get to that. It varies based on your side, but we have an actual evaluation document based on gathering some data. I can actually tell you that, not only to get the initial project done, and then what it will take to maintain it. Because every size, coming into it will vary a little bit based on size, but we have that figured out. Plus, as part of having compliance as a service, that actually gives you a third-party access to a third-party VSO as well as part of the service. So there's certain compliance frameworks now that are demanding that a CISO be on staff or be third party. They cannot be the same, the IT director have two roles. Watch that. That's starting to happen, and that's just happening in banking right now. I got several banks we're working with where we're actually having to do the CISO service for them because of that. Let's see, John, with being a small shop, is there an audit your company can do that will show us where we like it? Actually, there's an offer that's at the end of this that is going to do exactly that. How do you choose the right audit? Do you have different packages based on the type? Yeah, so it's not audit. Audit is an auditor coming in to validate. What we do is the readiness. So what we do is based on your business, we figure out which of the controls, NIST controls, CIS controls, HIPAA controls, what are those frameworks that apply to your business? The one I apply to everybody is the cybersecurity compliance framework that's based off CIS. Because with it, if you have those in place, then that means you have everything in place you need to get cybersecurity insurance and get better rates on cybersecurity insurance. So that's one we apply to everybody. Okay. But yes, how we figure out is be talking to you and figure out what you have and what you need. And that we can do through a discovery call. Okay. So, who is this not for? Okay. And there's clients that this is not for, but they're ones that have complete compliance teams. They got all their own tools. They're doing it for themselves, and they got a handle on it, and they got people that's dedicated. That's the only company this is not for. Okay. But it is for anybody that it helps. I mean, John and well, I got two Johns. I got to look at it. I got John Lewis and John Hissey. It applies to everybody you've talked about so far. I've got, like I said, a benefits company with 1,700 users. It applied to them, and we was able to help them. And we got banks we're doing for. We're doing it for insurance companies. We're doing it for manufacturing companies. So it applies to everyone. One thing I tell everybody, if you think about this, every business has an employee of some type, even if it's just you, okay? You have PII information about those employees. HIPAA applies to you. Not the whole HIPAA stack, but there are controls in HIPAA that apply to you. You got PII information, cybersecurity insurance applies to you. Okay? So if, I get some of these folks that will tell me, well, I don't have to abide by any industry. Yeah, that's not true. It's just not. There is some type of compliance framework that applies to all of us, no matter what state of business we are, sole proprietor up to the big guys, okay? So we have the journey, and what we want to do is where do we start and how do we get there, and what's that journey through all the pieces we talked about, figuring out what compliance that is required, evaluating our status, acquire the information that we need to know to be able to develop and determine the actual plan of action I got to do. So then I've got my peace of mind. Okay. That's what this whole journey is about. So what are we offering? So as part of this whole thing here that we're doing, we're going to offer a few things to you. And this whole offer, if you decide to take advantage of it, and then later you want to go on and do the full level of compliance service, anything you spend on what we're offering here today will apply. But here's what we're offering to you. We're going to an external penetration test that we're going to do for up to 10 IPs to your environment. And this is a third-party certified pen test. You can take it, the report, and any auditor will accept it. It will meet any auditing requirement, no matter what industry you're in. We're going to sit with you and we're going to figure out what frameworks apply to you. in this consultation we're going to do. We'll figure out which ones they are, why you would need them, so it can educate you to it, so you can understand what those are, okay? Then we're going to actually take the cybersecurity compliance baseline framework, and we're going to do a quick baseline assessment just to see where you sit from a cybersecurity insurance posture standpoint. And that'll be a baseline questions where we come in. It's very similar to what we do for every the big ones. But we want to at least give you something where you know where you stand, at least from cybersecurity insurance, because to me, that's your starting point for anything, is to get you where you can get insurance to protect yourselves. That's a starting point for everybody. Well, also, my chief compliance officer is going to sit and review the assessment and the actual external pen test with you and walk you through it, because the external pen test, not only is it going to tell us what vulnerability you have, if you have it, but also it's going to show you how we exploited it. White hat, not going to hurt any systems or anything, but we're going to show you how it can be exploited with screenshots, command lines, all the information, and give you a recommendation how to go fix it. So it's not just reporting saying, hey, you got a hole here. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to tell you what we find, how we found it, and what we recommend you do to fix it. That's going to be in the external pen test report. And then on your questionnaire, we're going to give you, based on your knowledge, where you think you're at. Well, this is coming into it, and what our recommendations be to move forward with that from a cybersecurity standpoint. This also is going to give you kind of an inside view of full compliance as a service. Okay? And then I'm going to also do a one-on-one call with you, answer any questions you have, and spend time with you after you've done this with the compliance officer to sit and talk about and see what question you have, if there's things you need to address, and how we can possibly help you. Okay? So what are we offering here? So the external penetration test for 10 users, 10 IPs, we normally charge $24.90 for that external penetration test. Okay? Baseline assessment typically is a $1,500 assessment to do a cybersecurity insurance baseline assessment to see where you're at, get to determine what you need to go off and do. Review with the chief compliance officer, typically based on his rates, to do the review of those reports would be $299. Call with me is typically $500, $499, so that's $47.88. Okay, that's what we typically charge for just that right there. But what is it worth to you? Would it be worth $14.95? Now, not only $14.95 to do this, and you get that, and all this factual information you can use with your auditing. It's going to help you move forward, see where you're at. You can look at it's a health check to your environment from a cybersecurity and compliance standpoint. But also, if you decide to move forward and do the compliance as a service, we're going to take this and apply it to that service. You don't have to spin it again. We're going to apply it to whatever your service side comes out to. Okay? So that's what we're doing there. So now, questions and answers, and I'm going to quit sharing the screen, and I'm going to come back in where you can see my face, whether you want to or not, but we can come into it. And I'm going to address some more questions here. So, how do you choose the right audit? We talked about that. Coming into that is we sit down, and when we talk to you, we'll determine what those things are. Small bank in Arkansas, do you service this? Absolutely, we do. We actually have an office in Jonesboro. Arkansas State University network is about 5 or 6 of those campuses are our customer. I have clients in Little Rock. Whereabouts in Arkansas are you, John Lewis? Let's come back to Sean Jacobs. How often do you conduct vulnerability scanning? Well, it's compliance as a service. If you're running that, we're running them every month. We can run them as often as we want or as little in a month, but we're doing them at least once a month because we want to maintain you within a 30-day readiness for compliance. So that's at a minimum, we're doing it once a month at a minimum. What does pen test look for? Okay. What penetration testing is looking for is from external, I get these IPs, I'm trying to find out if there's any ports open that I can infiltrate, if there's configuration issues that's allowing me to get by your firewall, if there's the firewall has the actual management interface exposed to the internet, can I hack it? Is there known CVEs on that external environment, whether it's a secure gateway, whether it's the firewall, whether it's whatever that front end is, can I exploit any known CVEs that are there? And if so, what are they and how did I do it? That's what the penetration testing is doing. Hopefully that answers your question there, John. Charlie. Well, I appreciate that, Charlie. We've got small shop IT shops, and we've got customers that are, like I said, pretty large. They got large IT shops, but when we're doing the compliance side, and now that gives you the check and balance and coming into this. So for us, as from a sole proprietor, which we have people that are just a single person CPA firm, and we're doing this for, all the way up, like I said, 1,000 seats, almost a couple thousand seat environments that we're doing it for. West Memphis, Arkansas. Oh, you're out in West Memphis. Yeah, Mid-South Community College. I used to do a lot of work with them out there. So absolutely, we can help you there, John. Is there any other questions? These have been all great questions. Did I miss any? I want to go back up here and look here. What do you look for? Coming here. So that's where we're coming from. So what I want to do before I'll go share right back out is that was on the screen. For those that want to discuss this further and get into and look at maybe taking advantage of this offer or further discuss further into doing full-fledged, you can actually go to this web URL, www.avtechsolutions.com/discovery call. When you book a appointment, that's going to book directly on my calendar, okay? And when you book into it, say that you want to talk about compliance as a service. And we will come into this. If we do any of this, then we can make sure it equates back to this, and you can take advantage of the actual offer that we've made here. So hopefully this has been very helpful, very enlightening for you. I would really like your feedback to understand if this gave you any ideas. Is this helpful? Also, I'd like to hear what else could I bring that's going to help you from an education standpoint around all of this. I'll be more than happy because I have these webinars the last Tuesday of every month, and I like to take input from my attendees that's coming to this. What things do you want me to research and come back and educate folks on? I'll be more than happy to do that because to me, education is king. And not only do I get to share, I get to learn at the same time. Yeah, so be any other questions, we're wrapped up from here. If there's no other questions, then I appreciate your time. I hope this was worthwhile. And I hope you reach out to me and book on my calendar and we can carry this discussion further. If not, I hope you have a blessed day. And I hope that if you need anything, you'd be willing to reach out to us. So with that said, and I don't see any other questions here, I want to say have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time.